It was a cold autumn morning, and the thick, gray air perfectly matched the gloomy walls of St. Mary's Catholic School. The wind howled around the venerable building, a sound that seemed like an echo of past screams. St. Mary's was old, so old that even the oldest teachers only knew stories about its origins. Rumor had it the school was built on the ruins of a monastery, once infamous for its brutal discipline. And the endless corridors seemed to whisper stories, and the ceilings were so high that each step felt like a faint echo in a vast, empty space. The students knew the rumors. Shadows that moved when no one was watching, footsteps echoing in empty halls, and the chapel, a place many avoided, and except when forced to enter. But like all stories, most believed these were just legends. That was until Helena arrived. On that morning, the wary students of class Clentron B shuffled into their classroom. Their voices were a quiet murmur in the cold, still air. Sister Beatrix and the feared headmistress entered with her usual authority, followed by a girl. The students fell silent. The girl, Helena, looked as if she were from another era. Her pale skin seemed almost transparent, and her long black hair lay motionless on her shoulders. But it was her eyes that silenced everyone. Deep black, as if they could devour anything they encountered. "This is Helena," Sister Beatrix announced sharply. "She will be joining your class from today. Show her your best behavior." No one moved. Helena said nothing, didn't even nod. She quietly went to a seat in the back row and sat down. Her movements were slow, almost mechanical, and the headmistress left the room, and the murmur of conversations resumed, although softer than before. The first week with Helena passed, and the students couldn't make sense of her. She barely spoke and seemed to be there only to observe. She wrote notes in an old, battered book that no one ever got a closer look at. Some noticed that an unusual aura surrounded her, a chill that filled the room when she entered. Others claimed to have seen the shadows around her grow longer or move, even though there was no light source to cast them. Soon, and strange things began to happen. Once during math class, a piece of chalk suddenly fell from the board. No one had touched it. Another time, a bookshelf in the library toppled over, although no one was near it. At first, the teachers dismissed these as coincidences, but the students were already whispering about Helena. Paulina, known for her mocking sense of humor, openly made fun of her. "Maybe she's a ghost," she said one day during break. "Or a witch who's going to curse us." Some students laughed nervously, but others looked away. But Helena remained motionless as if she hadn't heard. Her gaze rested on Paulina, long and intense. That very night, Paulina screamed at the top of her lungs. Her parents found her trembling in bed, her arms and legs covered in bloody scratches. She stammered something about Helena being in her room. But the windows had been locked, and no one had broken into the house. Helena refused to return to school ever again. The rumors about Helena grew. In the chapel, a place many students avoided anyway, and some reported a heavy, unsettling atmosphere. The candles on the altar flickered, even though there was no draft. Even one student swore he had heard whispering, even though he was alone. The janitor, known for cleaning the building at night, quit his job. He refused to say why. Lisa, a quiet girl who often prayed in the chapel, disappeared one day. She was last seen there, alone, and the Krenin with her prayer book in her hands. Her parents searched desperately for her, and the police were called. But there was no trace of her. The only thing found was her diary lying on the altar. On the last page, in shaky handwriting, it read, "She is coming for us." The incident left the school in silence. No one spoke openly about Helena anymore, but everyone knew she was somehow connected to Lisa's disappearance. Some students claimed to have seen Lisa in their dreams, trapped in an endless, dark space. Marcus and Clara, two of the braver students, decided to get to the bottom of things. They researched in the old school library and came across a yellowed yearbook from 1902. In a class photo was a girl who looked exactly like Helena. The comment is she had the same pale skin, the same empty eyes. The caption froze the blood in their veins. Class of 1902, missing student Helena R. disappeared without a trace during a ritual in the chapel. A ritual? What could that mean? Hawkeye, Marcus, and Clara knew they had to investigate the chapel further. On a silent, moonless night, they sneaked in with flashlights. The room was icy, uncool even though the heaters were running. The silence was so deep they could hear their own heartbeats. They found the yearbook lying on the altar, open to the same page they had seen in the library. But now another line had been added. "You are next." And the chapel doors slammed shut, and a gust of wind made the candles flare. The air was thick, almost suffocating. A dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was Helena, but she had changed. Her limbs were twisted, her eyes were bottomless pits, and her smile was cruel and distorted. "You called me," she said. Her voice sounded like an echo from the depths of the earth. "No. You will stay with me forever." Marcus and Clara screamed, but their cries were swallowed by the howling wind. The darkness enveloped them, and when morning came, the chapel was empty. The yearbook still lay on the altar, and on the last page, a new message had appeared. "Thee belong to me now." After this incident, the authorities closed the school. The official reports cited structural damage, but the few students who survived knew better. St. Mary's stood empty, its windows shattered. The altar covered in dust. But on stormy nights, you could still hear the whispering of those who would never escape.